Welcome to Are You Quizzing Me? I am Vineet Nair with my co-host Aditya Kashyap. This is a quizzing trivia podcast show. Join us as we dive deep into history, science, pop culture, and so much more. Let's get quizzing. Now, this is a question I ask at the top of every episode, which I answer towards the end of the episode. Hamartiology is a branch of Christian theology which is the study of sin. In Christian hamartiology, the sins that cry to heaven for vengeance, and that is literally the name, sins that cry to heaven for vengeance, in Latin called peccata clamantia, literally meaning screaming sins, are 4 specific sins which are listed by the Bible. While the Bible only refers to specific acts by biblical characters as crying to heaven for vengeance, in Western Christianity, these references are expanded upon and treated as an establishing a category of particularly serious sins. Along with the 7 deadly sins and the eternal sins, the sins that cry to heaven for vengeance are the most serious transgressions against the law of Christ. Now, I'm going to be telling you the 3 out of the 4, and I want you to tell me what the 4th sin is. So, 1 is the blood of Abel, which stands for homicide, infanticide, patricide, fratricide, matricide. So, killing a family member, killing somebody in general. Number 2 is the sin of the sodomites, which is non-procreative sexual acts. And number 3 is the cry of people oppressed in Egypt, the cry of the foreigner, the widow, and the orphan, which can be generalized into oppression of the poor. What is the 4th sin? I will reveal the answer at the end of today's episode. Let's now move on to the question that Aditya asked at the end of last week's episode. This is the non-serious portion of the quiz.
The question from last week was, just like Snoopy from Peanuts is the mascot for NASA and its astronaut safety program, who would be an iconic mascot for ISRO? Here there's a little bit of a conspiracy theory / anagram / fun little piece of trivia which is completely made up. But the first part is not made up because ISRO, as you do know and we've discussed this before, used to be called INCOSPAR, INCOSPAR. Before it was renamed to ISRO. Do you know what INCOSPAR is an anagram for? Multiple things, but the one that concerns us is prison CA. And who is the most iconic prison CA in fiction of all time? Andy Dufresne.
Oh.
He was basically a CA in the Shawshank prison because he was helping everybody do their audits and their taxes. So, Andy Dufresne would be the best and the most effective, I would say, mascot for ISRO, because he was the original prison CA.
Why? Okay.
Tell me you're not blown away.
Yeah, because I'm fairly sure he was a banker. I don't know if he was a chartered accountant.
That was before he was incarcerated.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. You're getting caught up in like trivial details. In fact, ISRO, when it was founded, there was a very prominent scientist by the name of S.K. Mitra, who was conducting experiments in the ionosphere through ground-based radio in Kolkata, which was one of the founding moments of ISRO, or INCOSPAR. And guess what his name was? S.K. Mitra. Stephen King Mitra. What?
No,
Please
stop.
tell me your mind is not blown into a million pieces.
I'm just surprised you're not in a white padded room right now. Leaving aside the paranoia and fake news, let's start with the serious trivia, actual factual trivia for this week. I'll go first. So, this is a slightly long question with a very short answer. So, bear with me. Aditya, have you heard of Werner von Braun?
No, I have not.
Okay, so I'm going to educate you and our audience on who Werner von Braun was. So Werner Magnus Maximilian Frere von Braun was a German aerospace engineer and space architect. He was a member of the Nazi Party and the Allgemeine SS. And he was a leading figure in the development of rocket technology in Nazi Germany. He helped design and co-develop the V-2 or Vengeance 2 rocket at Peenemünde during World War II. The V-2 became the first artificial object to travel into space on 20th June 1944. Following the war, he was secretly moved to the US along with 1,600 other German scientists, engineers and technicians as part of Operation Paperclip. Now, if you don't know what Operation Paperclip was, Nazi Germany had a lot of great scientists, many of them who'd made advances in science. Even though they used a lot of unethical methods to get to those scientific discoveries, they had a lot of scientists. These scientists excelled in biotechnology, in biology, in nuclear physics, in rocketry. So the Germans and the Americans secretly funneled these scientists back to Russia and the US, despite many of them being open Nazis. So that was called Operation Paperclip. The US operation to do that was called Operation Paperclip. So among the scientists who got moved like that was Werner von Braun. Once he reached the United States, he worked for the United States Army on an intermediate range ballistic missile program. And he developed the rocket that launched the US's first space satellite, Explorer 1, in 1958. In 1960, his group was assimilated into NASA, where he served as director of the newly formed Marshall Space Flight Center and was the chief architect of the Saturn V Super Heavy lift launch vehicle that propelled the Apollo spacecraft to the moon. So this tells you who Werner von Braun was, right?
Sure.
Even though these are the things that he's famous for, my question has nothing to do with any of this. Project Mars, A Technical Tale, is a science fiction novel by von Braun, which he wrote in German in 1949. Henry J. White translated the book into English and it is published later by Apogee Books. The novel is set in the 1980s and is about the first human mission to Mars and their encounter with benevolent Martians on the planet. The humans learn about the Martian social structure and their form of government, which is run by 10 men under the leadership of one Martian known by their title X. So, I want you to tell me what is the title given to the leader of the Martian government in Werner von Braun's Project Mars, A Technical Tale. I know this sounds like a question from left field, but I'm telling you, you can guess the answer.
Is there a Nazi reference? Is it Führer or something?
The surprising thing is, it's an absolute opposite of a Nazi reference.
Oh. So somebody who was Jewish and I don't know, was it something to do with Einstein? Were they called the Great Einstein or something?
You're very close with the kind of title you're looking at. Yes, it is a name of a famous person. And you're also right when you're saying you're guessing that the name is Jewish in origin.
Jewish in origin, but not necessarily of a Jewish person. Interesting. And when I say interesting, I mean completely confounding.
Okay.
I have no idea.
So as we've said before, sometimes you, instead of playing the question, playing the game, you play the person, right? So I'm asking you this question, and I'm asking you this question about Mars, right? And I'm asking you the question about this person who would be the leader of the Martian government.
As far as I know, you've never been to Mars, so I don't know how that would have anything to do with you.
Actually, I had many years, I think almost a decade ago, I think NASA had put out, asking for volunteers for any potential Mars mission in the future. I signed up. I have an email from them saying that we will consider your application and everything. But nothing ever came of that.
Yeah, I signed up for it too. I signed up for it as well. So at least now we know if we both move to Mars, we can continue the podcast.
Yeah.
The first Martian podcast. Okay. Jewish in nature, Jewish in origin, like maybe then something from the Old Testament. Is it like Abraham or something?
It is a biblical reference. You are right. It's from the Old Testament. However, almost everybody knows this name. But unless you've read the Bible or you have a very keen eye for detail, you may not know that this is a Jewish name.
Interesting.
This is a very obscure reference about a man many people have not heard about, right? Werner von Braun, at least in the 80s, 90s, like I grew up hearing about this guy. He was a very controversial figure. But like the general public now, 20, 30 years later, may not know who Werner von Braun was unless they watch, a lot of historical miniseries and things like that. But then I've dragged something, an obscure writing that he wrote in 1949, and I'm putting it in front of you, and I'm telling you it's guessable, and I'm telling you it's about Mars.
So it has something to do with somebody current or something that is current.
Yes.
Mars. Mars and current only makes me think of Elon Musk.
It is Elon. The title was called The Elon.
Oh. Wait, firstly, I'll laugh properly at that answer. But Elon is a Jewish name? I had no idea.
Yes. Elon was a Jewish name.
Okay. Now, back to me laughing at the answer.
Okay. So, this is...
What is he called Elon?
Yeah, so this is a very weird kind of coincidence, right? So there was this book, as I mentioned, that Werner von Braun wrote in 1949 in German. It was called Mars Project in German, but it was not published for around 57 years. So the book had nothing to do with Elon Musk being named his. His father liked the name Elon because of its biblical references. Fun fact, he was actually going to be named after Nice, the French city. So we might have got Nice Musk, which would have made his name sound even more like a perfume. So in the biblical book of Judges, Elon was a leader judge of the ancient Israelites. Elon appears in Judges 12:11 to 12. He was a member of the tribe of Zebulun who served as a judge of Israel for 10 years. So it's, I think, as Jewish a name as you can get. And the fact is, it's a complete coincidence. Nobody knew this until the book was published, 53 something odd years later. Elon Musk was already grown by the time. And suddenly now we have this crazy man talking about space and getting to space and putting up a colony on Mars. And his name also happens to be Elon, which is the name that Werner von Braun had given as the title of the person leading the government of the Martians. In that case, it was a title. It was The Elon.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, not surprising. I would not have expected that, but yeah, I get it. I see why Vineet would be interested in this trivia. I see you, Vineet. I see you.
Yes.
All right. Let us move from that unexpected twist in trivia to another unexpected moment in history. And here we talk about 1807. Do you know what happened in 1807, Vineet?
I'm guessing a lot of things.
Okay, cool. Yeah, a bunch of things did happen in 1807. One of the things, though, was that the outset of the Peninsular War, it was the military conflict in the Iberian Peninsula by Spain, Portugal, and the United Kingdom against the invading and occupying forces of the First French Empire during the Napoleonic Wars.
Okay, yeah.
It lasted from 1807 to 1814. So, in 1807, Napoleonic forces invaded Portugal due to the Portuguese alliance with Great Britain.
Okay.
The Prince Regent of Portugal at the time, John, who had formerly governed the country on behalf of his mother, Queen Maria I, since 1799. Anticipating the French invasion, John did something completely unprecedented, just something nobody else would have ever done before that in history and did since then. What unexpected move did John pull out just as he was anticipating the invasion from French troops?
Okay, so I'm going to take a big guess here. I'm guessing he took French spies and crucified them on the dock, so that when the French came in, they saw that and they were like, and they got scared and went back.
That is a very accurate depiction
That
of
was a
what would have
KGF
happened.
reference, by the way, if nobody knows.
Oh, okay, KGF. I thought it was a Game of Thrones reference. But except, I think the French spies would have gone, and then the H would have been a little missing in the that we just did. Yeah. The French accent was slightly off, but everything else was accurate. Except, no, that is not the answer.
Okay.
Do you want to take a stab at something that not just historically significant, because obviously 1807, but also geographically significant?
Anything to do with marine life? The Portuguese man o' war? Jellyfish?
Oh, no, nothing to do with that.
Okay, I'm going to need a clue.
Sure. So the clue that I can offer is that this change, while it happened in 1807, it lasted till 1821 when things were reset back to as they were. So around a period of like 13, 14 years,
Okay.
something changed and it was reset only back in 1821, which is when John the Sixth of Portugal set things back to as it was.
Set things back to what it was. This can't be a blockade, right? Obviously, it's not a blockade or anything, because they were trying to.
It was more of a strategic retreat than anything on the offense. It was more of a defensive move.
Okay. See, the thing is, I can't get a grasp of what it could be, like, because I do know about this particular point in history, but it's mostly broad strokes.
I would ask you to focus on the fact that it was a strategic retreat. Where would they be retreating to?
Portugal has only one place to retreat to: Spain.
Or
Wait, what? Portugal's almost surrounded, if my geography serves me right, Portugal is almost surrounded on three sides by Spain and one side by the sea.
there we go. A maritime retreat would lead them to.
Okay, they can go north, which would take them to the British Isles. They could go south, which would take them to North Africa. Or they could go west, which would take them to the US.
How about southwest? Portuguese, southwest of Portugal,
You're going to South America?
across the Atlantic.
Brazil? Rio? Wait, did they shift the power of God, the seat of government from Portugal to Brazil?
For the first time and the only time in history, the European seat of government, a European capital, was moved to somewhere else. That was in South America, and specifically Rio. So for 13 years, Rio was the seat of the Portuguese Empire. And that actually sowed the seeds for Brazilian independence, because the future rulers who were born there felt more Brazilian in their identity than Portuguese.
Oh.
And they actually started the whole process of Brazilian independence. Before that, Brazil was sparsely populated. It's only when the Portuguese decided to move their entire freaking capital to Rio did the country gain some of its own identity. Yeah. I thought it was pretty interesting that a European capital was outside of Europe for a while.
I'm going to call this the longest castling move in history.
Yeah, that is pretty accurate. Yeah.
Okay, that was a great question. I really did not know that. That was a complete TIL. Okay. So the Portuguese Empire had their entire capital shifted to Rio. Nice. I don't have a proper segue to give to this, but there is a segue somewhere probably in the answer. So I'm going to ask you a question which has been sent to us by one of our listeners, Dr. VT Rajesh. So let me preface this by saying that this question is based on a very, let's say, well-known or popularly known fact, even though the evidence for it is lacking historically. So before anybody comes to the comments and says that, no, there is no evidence, we don't know this. Yes, I know this is an apocryphal story, but it's a fun question. And Rajesh did spend the time to mail us with the question, so I'm going to ask it anyway. So, to whom in history can we attribute the invention of left-hand side driving or driving on the right side of the road? And can you tell me what the reasons were that he or she chose this side?
Oh, interesting. It's funny because very often when I'm trying to find trivia, I usually end up going down rabbit holes, as do you. And I've gone down the rabbit hole of driving and its history and even the right hand, left hand side. But somehow I never encountered this, even though you said it is an apocryphal tale, not necessarily solid history. And I still haven't encountered it. Let's see. Somebody came up with the right hand side driving.
Yes.
No, yeah, I'm lost. No idea.
So, you know that what we do in India, right, and what is done in the UK and many other countries of the world is that we have right-hand driving or we drive on the left side of the road, right? Now, that is the historical legacy that we have from the time that people were riding horses.
Right.
So, why, if you were, say, riding a horse, say in ancient Rome or even in England in the medieval period, why do you think you would want your horse to be on the left side of the road when riding?
Oh, right. I think this is something I've also read. To be able to draw your sword from your right hand.
Exactly.
In case of an enemy was approaching us.
Yeah. So this was the norm, say, in England, which is where most of these customs, due to their extremely colonial nature, everybody followed that up to a point. Now, let's say if England is the focus point for you to say that, okay, this is the country which kind of popularized driving on the left-hand side of the road. Again, that's not completely true, but for the purposes of this clue, let's assume that it is England. Who do you think would be responsible for saying no? If they're going to drive on the left-hand side of the road, I will drive on the right-hand side of the road.
I would assume Washington?
No. It wasn't Washington per se. I believe in America, left-hand drive was common until around the late 19th century.
Yeah, I remember reading that as well. Then I'd say Hitler.
No. This is much older than that. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, this is apocryphal.
Oh, then I would have to go with Napoleon.
Yes. So the story goes, again, this is just a story. There are no historical documents or primary sources which can prove this. But the story goes that Napoleon Bonaparte invented driving on the right-hand side of the road for two reasons. One reason being to rub it in on the British by choosing their opposite side. And also to avoid horse-clad swordsmen fighting each other, since in these cases, the swords would be the opposite sides for right-handed men.
Right.
This never made a lot of sense to me, but yeah.
Napoleon took the peaceful route, quite literally and metaphorically. That seems slightly out of character for him.
Yeah.
Wasn't exactly known to be a peaceful man. Anybody who has wars named after him cannot claim to be a peaceful person.
True. Yes. And shout out to Dr. VT Rajesh for sending us that question. Please keep sending us such questions. We would love to put them on the show.
Yeah, great question. And thank you for sending that question. Please send more questions in. Makes our life easier. Okay.
Yes.
So since we have been sticking to Europe for a significant portion of this episode, let me do another question. And this time we move to Denmark. So a little bit of a historical background to this question. For hundreds of years, there were spice salesmen who would travel around Denmark, and they would remain bachelors because they were never in one place long enough to settle down with someone. They would not find a partner, and they would sometimes be known as Pepperswens. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but that roughly translates to pepper dudes. And so single women also came to be called Pepperma, Pepper Maiden. So my question is, how is this little historical trivia relevant today, or what artifact does it have in Danish culture today?
I know precious little about Danish culture, but my mind was actually going to Peppa Pig, but then I guess that's not Danish.
Oh, that would be something.
Okay, so this is something that has historical roots. Men who remained bachelors because they couldn't settle down. They were spice merchants and kept roaming the country. And you said the women traders were called Pepperma. Did I understand that right?
Honestly, don't quote me on the pronunciation of it, but yes, the female maidens, not the traders, women who were unmarried, were called Peppermo, and the men would be called Pepperswens, pepper dudes, and pepper dudettes.
Okay, I have no idea where to go with this. I'll need a clue of some way, shape, or form. This is completely alien to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine this would be very common knowledge outside of Denmark, but it is still a fun piece of trivia. So I'd ask you to focus on the fact that it has to do with being single, and it is almost a milestone celebration. Actually, let me be even more specific. When men at the age of 25 and even at the age of 30 are perhaps unmarried, because the average age of men getting married in Denmark is 34, if I'm not wrong. So unmarried men at the age of 25 and even later at the age of 30 go through, let's say, a specific kind of celebration on their birthday. Take a guess as to what that celebration is.
Does this have anything to do with the horror movie Midsummer?
No. It has nothing to do with Midsommar.
Okay. Is this like a bachelor party thing? I mean, like, do they have a coming of age party, like a Sweet 16, like a Pepper 25 or something?
You're actually not too far. So the pepper thing is at the age of 30. But what specifically do they do with the pepper? Want to take a guess?
I have various guesses, but none of them can be said on this podcast unless I want to change the nature of its rating.
Ew.
No, dude, I'm just lost here. I should really know more about Danish culture.
Sure, you, I guess, can find out more about Danish culture. But it's actually rather simple. You are covered in spice. They throw a lot of cinnamon on you at your 25th birthday. And then when you turn 30, they throw pepper on you, which sounds a lot more painful.
Okay.
And sometimes even eggs for more adhesion is what I read. So they cover you up in cinnamon and with pepper when you turn 25 and 30 respectively. If you are single and are from Denmark, your friends would do that to you. And that is a birthday celebration in Denmark.
That is so weird.
Yeah. Though, I mean, considering the kind of things that people did to each other back in college, especially the boys that I was studying alongside of, the really, really, I would say brutal treatment that you receive on your birthday, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I've seen people being covered in toothpaste, in mud, in egg and milk and rotten milk and just absolutely. And it's a birthday celebration for some reason. I don't get it. Then again, at most things that college boys do, I don't think anybody gets. So this is how the Danes celebrate 25th birthdays for single men and women.
I remember this English or rather Indian comedian who's a UK citizen right now. She has I can't recall her name, I'm very sorry, but she's married to a Danish person. I remember her talking in one of her sets that the Danes are a bleak people. Yeah, I think this just encapsulates that they are very, very bleak. Just imagine waking up on your 30th birthday and having pepper thrown in your eyes. I mean, like, there's no upside to it. Like, if it's finely powdered, your eyes are going to just burn. If it's not been powdered or if it's whole, it's like being pelted with mini rocks. I mean, I just do not see the upside.
No, it is cinnamon powder. But I think you're forgetting the fact that in India, we also used to give, and I don't know if they still do, birthday bumps to kids, which was basically just kicking the hell out of them. Just beating
Yes,
them up.
I am aware of those.
So,
Yes, I am. Yeah, but then that's yeah. Who am I to judge? Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
exactly.
It's not so bleak when you
Just
think of birthday bumps.
kids beating each other up, wailing on each other.
Yeah, but then in India, at least, I think it's only the boys who do that. I've never seen girls do birthday bumps.
Yeah, I guess in some way then the Danes are more progressive. Everybody's equally stupid there.
Equal opportunity torture. Okay, nice, very spicy question. So I'm going to move to spice of another kind in more ways than one. A Recipe for Seduction. Okay, the name of the movie is A Recipe for Seduction, is a short film produced by the Lifetime channel starring Mario Lopez. 90s kids might remember him as the guy from Saved by the Bell. So, this was a Lifetime movie called A Recipe for Seduction starring Mario Lopez. It premiered on December 13th, 2020. It tells the story of a young heiress who struggles to choose between a wealthy suitor chosen by her mother and the new house chef, X. The film has a 70% score on Rotten Tomatoes, indicating generally positive views. Many critics noted the juxtaposition between the film's bizarre premise and its familiar use of tropes associated with Hallmark movies. Liz Cocan of the website Decider praised the film's storytelling and called it comfort food. Alexandro Del Rosario of Deadline Hollywood said that the film had an unusual casting for an even order title. So, as I mentioned earlier, that the story is about a young heiress who struggles to choose between a wealthy suitor chosen by her mother and the new house chef X. Who's X? Who's the character who plays the lead, who Mario Lopez plays? I will give clues, but I just want to see if you can work it out from this.
I'm going off the fact that you said the name is A Recipe for Seduction. You also mentioned that some critic called it comfort food.
Huh?
And seductive food makes me think of chocolates.
Okay.
So I'm thinking some chocolatier, Nestle or Hershey. Is it any of these people?
You have the right idea, but the wrong side.
Is it Willy Wonka? Is it
No. That's not Willy Wonka. So my clue for you would be repeating certain parts of this question. The name of the movie, as I mentioned, is A Recipe for Seduction. Alexandro Del Rosario of Deadline Hollywood said that the film had an unusual casting for an even order title. I've already mentioned the casting starring Mario Lopez. Mario Lopez plays X. So that's an unusual casting.
So Mario Lopez, going by the name, is an Hispanic individual.
Yes.
And I'm assuming it's unusual casting, which means the person in question is not traditionally Hispanic. Is it a historical figure? Is it a fictional character played by Mario
No.
Lopez?
So you were very close with your first answer. Close in the sense like you had the right spirit. You were thinking of a chocolatier. Just don't think chocolatier. It's not a chocolatier. Now I said chocolatier way too many times.
The word has lost all its meaning. So if not a chocolatier, somebody... it's a recipe. So I'm guessing it is either Coke, but then again, probably not that. Which brings me to the second person. Is it Colonel Sanders?
Yes, it is Colonel Harlan Sanders, the KFC Colonel himself.
Oh, what? It is a spicy question, I see.
Yeah. So this movie stars Mario Lopez, a very Hispanic person, playing the uber white a Kentucky colonel named Harlan Sanders in his youth. And he looks, bulging biceps and short t-shirts, but he still has the trademark white goatee. It's a weird movie.
Whoa.
Unsurprisingly sponsored by KFC.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So the KFC Colonel Harlan Sanders, has his own rom-com. My next clue for you was going to be this. Christine de Zurilla of the Los Angeles Times gave a favorable review, calling it a tongue-in-cheek take on the Lifetime romance genre and aimed at women who love men who love chicken.
That adds up, I guess.
Yeah, so Recipe for Seduction. There's a KFC movie.
Okay, so moving from that secret recipe, which turned out to not be a disaster, 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. Wow, that I would not have guessed that ever. A KFC movie with 70% Rotten Tomatoes. But since we are in the realm of film, I'm going to talk about another film and a little kid who watched that film and was inspired by it. So Jerry Parr, when he was a young child, 9-year-old child in fact, he saw the movie Code of the Secret Service. Code of the Secret Service was directed by Noel Smith, and it is the second of 4 films in a series based off of Agent Brass Bancroft. And there were a few more movies in that series. Can you tell me what did watching this movie inspired Jerry Parr to do in life? Which is the first part of the question.
Okay, so that's the first part of the question. So I have to answer this to get to the second part of the question, or are you going to be giving me the second part as well?
Yeah, so the first part will lead you to the second part.
Okay. Right off the bat, Jerry Parr does not ring a bell, at least not immediately. Code of the Secret Service, which was the second in a series of movies, you said, right? Anything to do with James Bond?
No. It's very straightforward, actually.
Straightforward.
Jerry Parr saw this movie and he was inspired by it. What was he inspired to do?
Okay, is this something to do with encryption? Pretty good security, pretty good protection, PGP security, anything like that?
I think you're perhaps overcomplicating this question. He saw a movie. The movie's name was Code of the Secret Service. It is a movie in a series about a certain Agent Brass Bancroft. And when Jerry Parr as a 9-year-old saw this movie, he was inspired. What was he inspired to do with his life?
Wait, this is not Stanley's real name or anything, right? Jerry Parr, Brass Bancroft. He then goes on in his life to alliterate every character he creates.
You're again overcomplicating this. Jerry Parr is not.
Okay.
I think you're trying to play the person too much right now. This has nothing to do with anything that interesting. Jerry Parr saw a movie called Code of the Secret Service. What was he inspired to do in his life?
Became a director or an actor?
That would be one route to take. Or
He became a spy.
I'll give it to you. He became a Secret Service agent. It's just as simple as that. There's nothing complicated about it at all.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the most straightforward question I have ever asked on this.
See, that's the problem. You're not supposed to ask straightforward questions.
Well, I will satisfy that urge of yours in the second part of my question. So Jerry Parr himself became a Secret Service agent. There was one significant event in Jerry Parr's career. What you could say service did he perform for his country, for the United States of America, in his role as a Secret Service agent? What did he do? Heroic thing he did, which is related to the film that he watched.
Okay, my problem, again, this is to all the people listening to this podcast, when he said Secret Service, my mind went to the British Secret Service, which is an intelligence organization. My mind did not go to the American Secret Service, which is more of a security and investigative organization. So I'm guessing that Jerry Parr is the Secret Service agent who saved, I think it was Reagan who got shot? Not Reagan. Was it Reagan? No, who? John Hinckley shot Reagan, right?
It was Reagan who was being attacked, and Jerry Parr did save him.
Yeah, I've read about this. It's like one of those forgotten facts. Jerry Parr, the name didn't register, Secret Service didn't register, but when you told me that, the American Secret Service, it just clicked. I remember reading this, yes.
Okay. Do you want to connect just the last part of the trivia for me? How is this relevant to the film you watched?
I think in that film also a Secret Service agent saves the president from a crazed fan or something like that. There is some kind of parallel. I remember there's a parallel, but I don't remember what it is.
Okay, I'll do this for you. I'll just connect the last part for you. Agent Brass Bancroft was played by
Ronald Reagan. Yes. Okay. Ronald Reagan was the actor who played Agent Brass Bancroft. Yes. Now it comes back to me. Yes, I remember this. Fantastic piece of trivia this is.
Exactly, yes. So, just to tie it all up together with a neat bow on top, Code of the Secret Service is a 1939 film directed by Noel M. Smith, and it starred Ronald Reagan in the heyday of his acting career. It was about the US Secret Service agent Brass Bancroft, portrayed by Ronald Reagan himself. And when Jerry Parr, this young guy, was 9 years old, a little boy from Alabama, he saw this film and he was inspired to join the Secret Service when he grew up. And at some point, when Ronald Reagan became president, there was an assassination attempt. And Jerry Parr was there to save the day as a Secret Service agent in service of Ronald Reagan, who was his original inspiration to become a Secret Service agent. And sometimes life just comes a full circle.
Yes, it does. And what's even more interesting, John Hinckley, I think was the name of the would-be assassin, was inspired to assassinate Reagan not because of any political problems or political disagreements. It was because he wanted to impress Jodie Foster, the actress.
Yeah.
Which is as weird as motives go.
It is pretty insane, because also inspired by a movie.
Taxi Driver? No, I don't remember which movie that was.
Yes, Taxi Driver. He started stalking Jodie Foster after the release of Taxi Driver, and became obsessed with her and whatever she was up to. And he wanted to impress her. Just like in the film, the protagonist Travis Bickle, in the end, attempts to assassinate a United States senator who's running for president. So over the years, Hinckley followed Jodie Foster around the country, and he actually went as far as to enroll in a writing course at Yale University when he read somewhere that she is a student at Yale University. So he was quite the stalker, quite the creepy dude who wanted to actually initially try to assassinate Jimmy Carter. And at some point he even came very close to it, but did not get around to finally doing it. And then he decided that he's going to try to do that for Ronald Reagan instead. And that is when all of these worlds of fiction and movies collided, and Jerry Parr saved Ronald life.
Nice. That's, I think, a fantastic way to end our questions for the day. There is still the matter of the question I had asked at the beginning of today's episode, which is the audience question. I hope at least some of you have worked it out. The question was that hamartiology is a branch of Christian theology, which is the study of sin. In Christian hamartiology, the sins that cry to heaven for vengeance are 4 specific sins listed by the Bible. Now, along with the 7 deadly sins and eternal sins, the sins that cry to heaven for vengeance are the most serious transgressions against the law of Christ. I listed out 3 of the 4 sins. One is the blood of Abel, which is homicide, infanticide, fratricide, patricide, and matricide. Then there was the sin of the sodomites, which was non-procreative sexual acts. There was the cry of the people oppressed in Egypt, the cry of the foreigner, the widow, and the orphan, which can generally be termed under oppression of the poor. What was the 4th sin? Aditya, do you have any idea?
Did we cover infidelity?
No, this is not part of that. These are, as we mentioned, sins that cry to heaven for vengeance. They're so heinous that the sins themselves are automatically like a call to heaven to lay God's vengeance upon this person who is committing this sin.
No, I have no clue right now, actually.
So I'm going to just tell you the answer because I don't think you can guess this. But the reason I asked this question is I find it very interesting that this sin with this particular terminology exists. When you look at America right now, not just America, most capitalist countries, many of whom are predominantly Christian, some of whom are openly Christian like the far right in America, and who are mostly capitalists. So I find this sin to be quite ironic. The sin is the injustice to the wage earner, which literally means taking advantage of and defrauding workers.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That is quite the irony. So I read this piece of trivia somewhere about how in terms of sheer volume or number of, I guess, occurrences, the greatest crime that is committed in the US is probably wage theft. If that is truly a crime that cries out to the heavens, boy, Americans are in for a rotten deal at the end of the day.
Yeah. So that was the audience question. I hope at least some of you got that. Aditya, what's your question for next week? The non-serious one, the one that will torture us for eternity.
Oh, there is a never-ending list of those. So the question for next week is, just like KFC made a film called A Recipe for Seduction, which Indian film was sponsored by an Indian brand, an Indian F&B brand, and how did they execute this particular product placement?
Oh God, I'm actually dreading the answer a week in advance. But that is the nature of the beast. And I wouldn't want you to change what you do and how you are. So we'll get to that answer at next week's episode. Aditya, any pop culture recommendations before we go?
Okay. So for my pop culture recommendation for the week, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to give a show that is very popular, but just in case you haven't seen it, you must check it out. The Bear season 3 is coming out very soon. So check out the first 2 seasons ASAP and then get ready to binge the 3rd one as well. The Bear is a story about a young chef who comes from the world of fine dining and comes back to his home city of Chicago to run his family's sandwich shop and eventually transforms it. It's a really interesting show. It is high octane in expected ways, as in the terms of a kitchen that is run under a lot of pressure, but also anxiety riddled in some very unexpected ways, in terms of how family dynamics play out sometimes. And if you are an anxious person, I would recommend watching it, but perhaps with something to comfort you alongside of it. And that would be my first recommendation. The second recommendation is actually the limited series Chernobyl. Chernobyl came out, I believe, in 2019 and was, as the name would suggest, about Chernobyl and the disaster that occurred there. It is a very compelling watch. Obviously, it is a fictionalized account of what happened there, but a lot of critics and a lot of people, a lot of historians had to say that it came close enough to reality and yet managed to not be boring or just throw information at you and still be interesting and engaging as a watch. So I would say these two things: the show Bear and the limited series Chernobyl on HBO.
Nice. Awesome recommendations. I think you've also mentioned The Bear, before on the show. So it's a great, fantastic show. I yet have to get to it yet. I'm guessing season 3 coming out should be an impetus for me to actually start watching from season 1 onwards. So thank you for that recommendation, Aditya. My recommendation for this week is based off a message or a comment that I received from someone who listens to the podcast, and that kind of inspired me to give this recommendation. My recommendation is about Indian movies, or rather the best Indian movies in my opinion, who have been inspired by The Godfather.
Whoa.
I'm not looking at direct one-to-one copies, so let's leave Daiwan and not Daiwan, Atanki Atank and all those out of the fray. I'm just talking about really good versions which have been inspired by The Godfather. So my first one would be Sarkar, which was directed by Ram Gopal Verma. That is a very faithful adaptation of The Godfather amidst Maharashtrian politics. Chilling and fantastic Amitabh Bachchan playing Marlon Brando's role. So that's a very faithful adaptation. That would be my first.
Mm-hmm.
The second recommendation I'm giving is Rajniti, which is the story of The Godfather set amongst a Mahabharat-style family in the Hindi heartland political belt. Of all the movies that I'm mentioning, this is actually the weakest of the list. However, Ranbir Kapoor does a decent facsimile of Michael Corleone, and the movie is fairly watchable. The two that I would recommend as being the best are both which are only very loosely inspired by The Godfather. So the first one would be Nayakan, which is Mani Ratnam and Kamal Hassan's fantastic movie based off The Godfather and the real life of Vardaraja Mudaliar, who was an actual don in Mumbai in the 60s, 70s and maybe early 80s. The movie came out in 1987 and was declared as one of Time Magazine's best movies around the world, top 100 movies around the world. So that's a fantastic watch. Very loosely inspired by The Godfather. There are portions which are inspired more by The Godfather Part 2 rather than 1, but fantastic watch. And a more recent film called Bhishma Parvam. It's a Malayalam language film which released last year, starring Mammootty as the Marlon Brando-esque character. It's also set similar to Rajniti. It's inspired by The Godfather. It's also inspired by portions from the Mahabharata, but it's very loose. It's just inspirations. There are no copies or anything, but it's very loosely inspired. And it's, again, a fantastic film. So these are my 4 recommendations. There are a lot more movies in India which have been inspired by The Godfather, but these are my 4 recommendations: Sarkar, Rajniti, Nayakan, and Bhishma Parvam. So those are my recommendations for this week.
Yeah, great recommendations, Vineet. Interestingly enough, so I'll give another third recommendation because a similar conversation happened recently with a friend, and we were discussing Gangs of Wasseypur and how both of us loved the film. And Gangs of Wasseypur, obviously a film that if you haven't seen, you should check it out. It is a pretty great Anurag Kashyap film. And another friend of ours mentioned, or rather asked, if Gangs of Wasseypur is inspired by Godfather as well. And I can see why, because crime, family and all of those things. But a closer inspiration would be City of God rather than Godfather. And
True.
City of God is the third recommendation I'd give. Just sheer brilliance of a film. If you like Gangs of Wasseypur, I would highly recommend checking out City of God. It is based on Rio and the crime lords and the drug gangs over there. So yeah, something you should check out.
Great. So you have your Talk Culture recommendations set for this week. That's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you all for listening in. We hope you enjoyed the show, learned something new. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, wherever you're listening to the show. It helps us reach a wider audience, allows more people to discover and enjoy the show. We'd also love to hear from you. You can send us questions like Dr. Rajesh did and other people have done in the past. All you have to do is to send us a question and put the name of the quizmaster in the subject line of the email. The email address is areyoquizzingme@gmail.com. You can also join our community. We have a subreddit, r/areyouquizzingme. You can also reach us on Instagram @areyouquizzingme. We appreciate your support and look forward to sharing more episodes with you in the future. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great day.
See you guys next week.
Instagram @areyouquizzingme. We appreciate your support and look forward to sharing more episodes with you in the future. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great day.
See you guys next week.